A great editor is a gift, and Fred was a great editor. Working with him truly felt like a gift.
Fred was the opinion section. There's not a thing that we do that is not imbued with the care that Fred put into it.
I learned by watching the example he set for us on the page, the example he set for us as journalists, the example he set as a thought leader.
Fred was both an empowering mentor and a challenging one.
I can remember the first editorial I wrote working with Fred as an intern. He put his fingers to the keyboard and essentially deleted and rewrote absolutely everything in my editorial, which sounds brutal, and it was, but I realized when I sat down to write an editorial the next day that I understood exactly what I had done wrong and how to not do it wrong again.
He was always asking me to tweak my kicker for columns, and he was usually right.
When I would write something that was especially good, you'd get like a one-word email from Fred being great or good stuff, or like sometimes you get like genius and you'd be like, well, I can feast on this for weeks.
His guidance to us as young journalists was always to make that extra phone call or send that extra email even when you think it's not necessary, because you'll never regret taking that extra step.
I asked him, how do I know what's a lead, what's a second, what's a third in terms of his placement on the page? And he looked at me, he said, John, you just write until you're done. I was like, what do you mean? What do you mean? I soon learned.
My first Thanksgiving in DC, I didn't really know many people, and he says, come have Thanksgiving with my family. He wanted to welcome you.
He just saw something in me that I didn't see in myself and kept taking chances on me. He said, you know, I know you're doing this operations job, but I think you'd make a good op-ed editor. Would you like to start editing this one columnist on the side? And I said, yeah. And eventually it was, do you want to be a full-on op-ed editor? And I said, yeah. I think he knew that it was my dream job before I knew that it was my dream job.
He knew so much about every topic, he'd seen it all, but he was always there to help us find out what we wanted to say and where we stood on things. He wasn't there to tell us, he wanted to help us figure it out on our own.
He encouraged us to write about very personal things, to use our lens to understand the various facets of the human condition, and that was something that would touch readers.
He really championed the voices of people who were standing up for freedom, were standing up for democracy, were standing up for principle.
What made him so wonderful and lovable and such a great mentor was that he was also a good person.
I would sometimes get, like an email or a call from Fred, and always, getting a call from your boss without sort of an explanation is a little bit nerve-wracking. And so I would call back, and, it would never be a problem. It would just be like, hey, wanted to check on you. Not necessarily about work, but just sort of human care.
I think every interaction with Fred was meaningful, and I think most people don't get that in a workplace.
I don't miss Fred just as a boss or just as a journalist, but I miss him as a friend too.
Fred was essential to us meeting and eventually getting married, and he was at our wedding and got thanked a bunch of times.
He's still with us. He's still present.
Just the ethos that he instilled in the department, it's inescapable.
I've said before that Fred is the only boss I've ever had. So, of course, he's the best boss I've ever had. But even if I'd had 100 other bosses, I think he'd still be the best of all of them.
That's how you know when someone has a great legacy. They're gone, but their example and their spirit, you can feel it, and it still guides you.